Hey everybody, coming up on the Cutting Edge podcast, we're going to be talking about the value of robotics in surgery. Fascinating subject, moving at the speed of light. See you in a moment.
Check it out.
For me, I'm very much, here's a problem. Let's take care of it. I have a solution for that.
Our goal when we opened was to provide the highest quality care that was possible at a price people could afford.
I literally talk to physicians daily. Kelly, I can't even log in to see my own billing. I have no idea what's going on. I get a report once a month and nobody can explain it to me. I make it a point to train the physicians how to go and pull their own report.
I'm going to be on the course reporting tomorrow afternoon.
You are?
I am. I'm going to follow Jordan Spieth and Will Zalatoris and Scotty Scheffler. I'm not really reporting, but I am going to go watch the park.
Probably drink a couple beers too.
Yeah, I might have a beer or two tomorrow afternoon. I mean, that would make my commentary even better.
Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode. It is, episode 3 of the Cutting Edge podcast.
Season 2.
Yeah. So we're making progress.
It's weird being in a different studio today.
It is.
But I like it in here.
Yeah, a little bit more intimate.
Yeah.
Although I don't take that the wrong way.
And we move on. Or we digress. I'm not sure.
Exactly. Well, man, we want to welcome everybody to this week's episode. A fun topic for me today, because this is near and dear to my heart in the healthcare space. Today's topic is the value of robotics in surgery. I think everybody in general in our society is aware of all the advances in healthcare, but we're really going to dig into the subject of what does that mean? What kind of robotics? Does that mean we're replacing people? No, but we're actually, we're really blessed to have the CEO of one of the leading robotics centers here in DFW joining us today, Baylor Scott and White Medical Center in Frisco. Welcome, Trevor. Trevor Castaneda, folks.
Hello. Thank you, guys. I first and foremost greatly appreciate the opportunity to join you and dive deep into an area that I'm passionate about relative to hospitals and cutting edge technology, and that's robotic surgery.
Awesome. Well, before we get started, we got a few mentions to make. Can't make this show possible without the help of Texas Assist Surgical Assist Staffing, Carrington Advisors, which is Tyler's group, a current underwriter of ours, the Hand and Shoulder Center of Fort Worth, and of course, Baylor Scott and White Frisco. Been a great supporter of us and part of why we're here today. So we recommend that if you haven't connected with us on our various social media channels, take the time to do so. Some great topics, both from last season and then coming up this season. You can find us on Facebook and LinkedIn, The Cutting Edge Podcast, on Twitter at TCE MedPod, Instagram, The Cutting Edge Pod, and YouTube, which is personally my favorite because you get to see our beautiful faces and not just listen to our wonderful voices.
Did you know that we had like 500 views last week across social media platforms?
Did we really?
We did.
Wow, that's pretty
We're
awesome.
becoming famous.
You're becoming famous. So we know we've hit the big time when we have a TikTok account and you're willing to manage that.
We don't do TikTok, but I would tell you that it was an interesting fact that when I hit the share button from my LinkedIn, the views just went through the roof. So I guess I should be doing that.
Well, maybe that's a precursor to this week. Trevor is a well-known executive in the healthcare community, and certainly in his circles, a man that's well respected. So with that being said, Trevor, man, we really appreciate you being with us today. I think where we want to get started with this topic of robotics and surgery is for us and our viewing audience to get to know you a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your background and kind of how you've ended up where you are today.
Sure. So I've actually been in healthcare for, going on 19 years now. Started out on the clinical side, inpatient, outpatient rehab. My background, sports medicine, athletic training, and eventually went to pursue an advanced degree, Master's of Healthcare Administration, that took me into the administrative side, the operational side of healthcare, which The last 11 years, I've been serving in various executive roles with organizations, CHS Community Health Systems, what was Health Management Associates. They were acquired by CHS, and now today with United Surgical Partners International, who's a subsidiary of Tenet Healthcare, leading the facility here in Frisco, Texas, Baylor Scott White Medical Center, Frisco. So started on the clinical side, ended up moving over to the administrative side. And really what drove that is during my time as a rehab tech, I wasn't really aware that there were individuals that ran facilities. It wasn't really something I thought about. You think about physicians and nurses and other support personnel, but you come to find out that there are actually people, let's say, behind the curtain of sorts that are driving the business, and they're coming up with the ideas for service line development and expansion and new technologies. And that was something that was very, very interesting to me. I very much love healthcare. I love connecting with people. I love hearing people's stories, but I also love strategy and business development and watching something go from pen and paper to bricks and mortar and to actual operation. Those are all very exciting things to me. And that's really what drove me to get into the administrative side of healthcare, making a difference, improving lives and improving utilization of technologies, efficiencies, and everything in between.
Interesting. So did you come up in a family of clinicians or healthcare providers, or what's that background look like, and how did you really decide that you wanted to be kind of this clinician / technician first?
Yeah, no, I think from the family side, it was a smorgasbord of everything. I mean, I have contractors, carpenters, chefs. I mean, we kind of do everything in my household, and so no one from the clinical side whatsoever. It's just something that I've always been driven to or attracted to. I just love the surgery. I love caring for people. I think for many people in healthcare, it's just something you're almost born with. You just have this passion that whether it's bedside care, whether it's non-clinical support, but you're doing great things for those that need you. I just had this internal instinct that that's the direction I wanted to go. Very much, again, starting on the clinical side, having that ability to have one-on-one contact with patients and hearing who they were and everything else. But then figuring out there's this whole other world in healthcare that is available to you to really expand your wings and improve healthcare overall, whether it's for a rural community, urban community, across a health system, across the state, whatever it is. I think healthcare is such a fun, exciting, challenging landscape. But it's something that keeps you on your toes and keeps you inquisitive and hungry and driven. It's just a really, really, really unique field that I'm very passionate about, that inspires me each and every day, watching my nurses care for patients, watching what's happening across the country, across the world, and advancements of technology and medicine. I don't see how someone could not be excited by that.
It's pretty cool. I'm curious, have you always been here? You mentioned CHS, you mentioned HMA. Have you always been working here in the DFW area, or did you migrate to DFW through your career progression?
Yeah, so most of my career was spent in the Southeast, leading facilities and various executive roles within markets of Georgia, Tennessee, and a small stint in West Virginia. And then most recently, prior to my time here in DFW, I was leading a facility in East Tennessee that was part of CHS in their Tenova market in Tennessee. And then was recruited out this way by a headhunter to lead Baylor Scott White Medical Center, Frisco, here in Frisco, Texas, a suburb of DFW. Very highly competitive market, which I love. I think it drives innovation. I very much believe that we are able to look toward to one another, even if we're competing facilities, to say, hey, look, what can we together do for our community? How can we better this community together? Even though we do compete with one another, I think that there's many opportunities to work alongside those other facilities to improve the health and the wellness of a community, especially a growing community like Frisco. Frisco has been recognized as one of the fastest growing cities in the United States for the last handful of years. And if you look around, it's not slowing down. I mean, the construction and the home sales, they just continue to skyrocket despite what's happening nationwide. I just don't see it slowing down. And so I look at Frisco almost like a healthcare mecca. And I think it's once in a lifetime opportunity to be a part of a community like ours and where we are today. And so to be able to have that opportunity, to be able to experience it, work alongside other great leaders in advanced medicine, not only here, but from a national stage too. I think what we're doing in DFW is very much recognized across the nation. And so that's exciting. It's something you should be proud to be a part of. And I very much am.
Is it a misconception, or, and I think you mentioned this back last season, but administrators tend to move around a lot. Is that intentional or on purpose, or is it just?
I think, Trevor, that's a great question for you, right? I mean, I'm on the outside looking in. I really can't answer that.
You know, I think in my experience has been always on the for-profit side of healthcare, right? And what I've seen is that you have more movement, or you tend to have more movement within the C-suite, regardless of where you are, assistant administrator, associate administrator. Of course, the further you are within that administrative ladder, you're more likely given opportunities to grow, which means you typically, you go to different markets and different facilities, and you're more likely to move. So, when I was coming up through the ranks as an assistant associate administrator, I moved facilities quite often, usually every year and a half to 2 years. But those moves were progressions in my career, which provided me with more oversight and responsibility and exposure to different markets. So I think you tend to see that more in the for-profit side of healthcare than the not-for-profit side, especially for those for-profit healthcare systems that have a reach coast to coast, north and south, and have a wide array of facilities across the country. I think there's just more opportunity to do so. But I think it's beneficial because, again, it exposes you to different markets, different dynamics, and different ways of doing things.
As an administrator in this massive growing metroplex, I'm curious your perspective on just hiring shortages across the board for doctors and nurses, and what does that look like in Frisco, and what's your perspective on that?
And I would kind of take a half a step back and, let's talk specifically about your facility there in Frisco, right? Everybody assumes a hospital does everything. They take ambulances, they take all, they take all comers, right? Your facility is a little bit different. Maybe share with the audience a little bit more about Baylor Frisco.
Yeah, sure. So we're not a trauma designated facility by any means. We are surrounded by facilities that do have various trauma designations, and they're well equipped, and they do an incredible job caring for those type of patients. We are more of a surgical based hospital, so we predominantly focus our efforts and our resources on surgery. And so we do have inpatient beds. We're actually licensed for 68 acute beds. I have a workforce of about 500 employees, a overall medical staff of 500. Of those 500, 300 are designated as active staff. We do roughly north of 13,000 surgeries a year. We do have women's services, so we do deliver babies here. We added that service line on in 2007. We opened our doors in 2002. So doing the math, we're actually this year is going to celebrate our 20th anniversary. That will take place in September. And so we deliver about 185 babies a month, level 2 NICU. So we do things that get more towards a full acute care type of facility. But the heart and soul of what we do is we are a surgical hospital. And we were actually the first hospital in Frisco, Texas. So we've been serving this community before Frisco was truly what it is today. And so to see how we've grown over that time, because by no means were we this size when we first opened our doors. We've expanded as the community has expanded, as the needs expanded for healthcare services of varying degrees. And so to be able to sit there and say, hey, we were the first here, and hey, 20 years later, we're about to celebrate our 20th anniversary. It's pretty exciting stuff. But again, not a full acute care facility, more of a surgical based hospital. And we, from service line standpoint, I mentioned women's services, but from a surgical standpoint, spine, orthopedics, GYN, urology, colorectal, And then, of course, getting into our robotics side, which we have multiple platforms of robotic technologies, whether we're talking about orthopedics or spine, or, of course, the DaVinci Xi platforms, which cover kind of a spread of specialties. But that's kind of us in a nutshell.
Yeah, big bariatrics program too, right?
We have so when I say general surgery, I use that as an umbrella term. I kind of always roll up bariatrics and colorectal into general surgery. Yeah, but bariatrics has just been amazing for us over the last several years. Last year, we ended up doing, I think it was roughly 820 or so bariatric cases, which was up from the previous year where we did 270. I think on this year, we're on track, projected 950 bariatric cases. And that catchment area for us, obviously, is just not Frisco proper, even DFW. We have patients travel from all over, Oklahoma, Arkansas, to come to our facility to have their procedures. We've even had patients fly from Florida. And so through our various centers of excellence and other designations, so in the bariatric space, Blue Cross Blue Shield Plus Distinction Center, as well as we're also certified through MISQUIC and what have you for bariatrics. But then you expand that out, and we have centers of excellence for joint and spine and total shoulder and so forth. So those designations, those accolades, obviously show that we are a high quality facility, good outcomes. And I do think that serves as a beacon for patients, especially in the bariatric space, that are looking for a high quality facility to go to have this procedure. But yes, to your point, bariatrics has been fantastic.
So, Tyler's question relative to staffing issues, right? The general assumption is in the healthcare business that nurse staffing or support staffing has been an issue. Because you're really more of a surgical hospital or surgically focused, has it been not as significant for you? Or how would you classify that?
Yeah, I don't think we're not immune by any means to the nursing shortage that we've all seen or heard about, just not locally, but nationwide. And it's not a shortage that just happened. I think there's some misconception in the community that the nursing shortage just all of a sudden appeared because of the pandemic. The nursing shortage, I think, has very much been an area of concern for operators for quite some time. I think the pandemic further exaggerated the shortage of nurses for a multitude of reasons, right? Whether it was nurse burnout, whether it was the opportunity to leave a facility to go work for a nursing agency, maybe in a hotbed zone, and obviously the pay was substantially more. I think we're all kind of living in this world of trying to figure out the landscape and next steps of how to mitigate the nurse shortage. I think many of us are still relying on nurse agency staff and seasonal workers to fill the gap so that we can continue to provide exceptional care for our patients and be able to provide support for our physicians. But no, by no means, we're not immune to what the other full acute care hospitals in the market or nationwide are dealing with at the moment.
That's interesting. So let's pivot to robotics and really get into the meat of the discussion, right? So give us a little bit of rundown of, when did your facility start doing robotics? And we're going to focus this particular episode on what I'm going to call abdominal surgery. So the DaVinci platform is really the premier platform out there. Give us a little bit of prior history that brings us up to today with doing robotics at your facility.
Sure. So Baylor Frisco, well before my arrival, and I've been here about 4.5 years, close to it, they were doing robotic surgery. They were doing it on a single platform, being the SI platform. And years ago, the SI platform was the premier platform for robotic abdominal surgery, and it was utilized by the specialties of GYN and general surgery, urology, and a few others. And I think the facility was doing okay. They were doing on average about 250, 260 cases annually on that single SI platform. But they weren't really growing it. It was just a stagnant 250 or so per year. But the facilities around Baylor Frisco who were reinvesting into their robotic service line, whether that be through physician recruitment or actual acquisition of newer technologies or realized efficiencies. You saw those facilities growing that service line and growing it substantially at a very fast rate. And so upon my arrival, and I guess I should say I have history with dealing with robotic programs at the other facilities I've been a part of and growing those. And so I came into this opportunity having a pretty well-rounded understanding of the do's and don'ts and what works and what doesn't work. And so really day one was starting of the analysis, right? Better understanding the market here, what was around us, what types of robots were in the DFW marketplace. So not only the number of robots, but the X and the XI, which were the newer generations, and XI today, obviously is the premier generation of platform within the Da Vinci portfolio. And then also looking at what were the capacity constraints, talking with area physicians, market physicians, whether they were here historically utilizing the robot or at other facilities. What were their needs? What was being met and not being met? And better understanding that paradigm altogether. And then coming back to talk with my administrative team, talk with the OR team to say, hey, look, I think there's some opportunity here. I think it's worth us taking a deep dive into and getting our physicians involved to better understand really what is the benefit here by reinvesting into our robotics platform. I don't think we're so far behind the eight ball that we don't take the time to do our due diligence and look at the upside here. And so needless to say, we did. And so in 2018, we decided to reinvest into our robotics program. And at the time, we decided to trade in the SI and bring on an X and an XI. And what we quickly found out was that everybody wanted to play on the Ferrari. Nobody wanted to play on the Jag, right?
Shiny thing syndrome.
Yeah. So we ended up flipping that X for a second XI. And obviously, there were some other technologies that came along with it, the Series 60 stapler, and then later the E1 header generator that just continued to enhance the platforms, right, and the efficiencies for the surgeons and for the program. And so in year one, and mind you, we didn't upgrade the technology until about May or June of 2018. So we were still on that single platform for the first 5 months or so of the year. In 2018, we ended up completing 453 robotic cases. So that was up from 2017, where we had completed roughly 250, right?
Yep.
And since that point in time, it's just been a stair-step effect year over year, you could say quarter over quarter, year over year, to where last year we ended up doing 1,271 robotic cases. So if you take that into account from where we came from 2017 on the single SI platform, and even part of 2018 to the end of 2021, that's almost 400% growth, just shy of 400% growth. And even in the year of the pandemic, I say the year, really 2020 was the most impactful, I would say, in the marketplace. We still saw growth around robotics.
That's interesting because this, having been in healthcare long enough and been close to this, it's a love-hate relationship with physicians, it seems. And these robots are not cheap. So maybe talk to our audience about how much does one of these robots cost? Is it and why would you bring one in, right? Like, yeah, okay, we know physicians that have shiny thing syndrome and they always want the newest thing, but that they don't always get what they want. So maybe dive a little bit into the economics of this for our audience.
Yeah. So no, you're right. I don't think technology in the healthcare space, period, is cheap. Anytime you put the healthcare tag on it, you might as well put a multiple of 3, 4, 5x, right? The robots are not immune to that. So specific to the XIs, ballpark it, depending on the other needs you need relative to support that technology, tables and what have you, roughly 1.8 million or so. So pretty expensive technology. I would say comparable to other types of robotic platforms that are out there, whether you're talking about the Globus MIS spine technology, the Stealth 8 system for spine. So they're all pretty comparable, but all very expensive. Which brings into question, well, if it's so expensive, why would you want to bring that technology into your facility? Well, there's absolutely clinical benefits to this. Especially if you're going from an open type of procedure to a robotic procedure, right? So if you look at from the patient impact, it's been shown significantly less blood loss, better outcomes. You improve the length of stay, or for the listeners, you lessen the length of stay in the hospital. There's just all these benefits to using this advanced technology to enter into the abdominal space. If we're talking about in that regard, general surgery, bariatrics, to provide these procedures. There's, of course, when you compare it to traditional laparoscopic approach, they're very similar in sorts, but I think the benefit there is more. There's still benefit for the patient, but I think even more so for the physician, just from an ergonomic standpoint. If you look at laparoscopic surgery, especially for surgeons doing bariatrics, there's a lot of wear and tear on the shoulders, and a lot of surgeons end up having some type of shoulder repair during their lifespan. And I think this technology also lengthens the lifespan of a surgeon in the OR. And you see a lot of surgeons who are transitioning from the laparoscopic approach to the robotic approach, because they know that it's going to be able to extend their career another 5, 6, 8, 10 years, just because of the reduction of the wear and tear on the body itself. But there's absolutely clinical benefits to the patient.
Talk. I hate to interrupt you, but talk about the economics for the hospital, because you're talking about all the clinical benefits and the benefit for the physician, but man, my biggest question is, does the hospital make more money when they bill for a robotic case versus a laparoscopic or an open case? And how does this make economic sense for you?
Yeah, so it's not really from a billable or even a reimbursement standpoint, right? It's not like insurers are out there reimbursing you at a higher rate because you're using a robot. The benefit here really is you're going to see benefit if you're able to standardize your processes back in the OR. So if you have an efficient OR support team, if you have a highly efficient physician, if you've standardized the instrumentation that you're utilizing for the robot across the various specialties, if you have efficient turnovers, you can actually see a savings per case, definitely versus an open case. But you can still see a savings even versus a laparoscopic case, whether that's $200 or $400 or $600 a case savings. That adds up over time. But that is really determined by your efficiencies to be able to support that program, because you can get upside down quite quickly if you have an inefficient physician manning the robot. If your team is not coordinated and you don't have the standardization of the instrumentation being utilized, it could end up costing you money at the end of the day. But again, I think there absolutely is a financial benefit and a cost savings opportunity. But additionally, when you have this technology available to surgeons in the marketplace, whether existing or incoming, I think you create a halo effect of sorts, especially if there's capacity issues under the facilities where these surgeons are able to access the robot for their cases. They're going to look for a home. They're going to look for the opportunity to utilize that technology elsewhere. And for us, in doing our due diligence around the marketplace, what we found more times than not were that robotic utilizers were not getting the time on the robot they felt they needed to be able to care for their patients in a timely manner. And by infusing that technology here, what we saw was almost like a magnet effect. We saw surgeons gravitating towards us because now they had the ability to provide timely care to their patients and get on the technology, being the XI, and not having to wait their turn at their home facility. They had the ability. Now what we have today is 3 XIs. So we're being able to meet that market demand from a physician standpoint, which then obviously results in incremental volume and incremental surgeries, right? Which there obviously leads to revenue that we can then take and infuse back into new technologies or enhancements for the facility, or back into our employees and bonuses and pay adjustments and so forth.
Interesting. Tyler, you're kind of sitting back taking this all in, and you're not in healthcare at all. What are you thinking?
This isn't the first time I've gotten to hear about robotics, but from the administrator perspective, it's really interesting. What kind of training goes in to this for the physicians? And let's just say you're a great surgeon, but you have no experience with robotics. You start fresh. How long does it take you to get up on that horse and ride it?
I think the learning curve is going to be different for everyone. I think I know personally there are physicians that can pick it up quite quickly. They go through their certification with Intuitive. They're signed off that they do the cases on the robot. They've been proctored. They have the case logs to demonstrate that. And I've seen others that it's such a huge learning curve that it's almost a deterrent to them to transition away from a laparoscopic approach of doing surgery to the robot. And so I don't think the robotic technology is easy for everyone to adopt, depending on where you are in your career, right? I think those coming out of residency and fellowship today have had much more exposure to this technology, as well as other technologies. And so it's not like learning a foreign language to them. But compared to someone who's been doing this for some time, asking them to change from a laparoscopic approach to a robotic approach, I think it's a bit more difficult. So to your question of how long it takes, it's different for everybody. I think the majority of surgeons that I've dealt with, their learning curve was very small, and they were back to where they were previously from a laparoscopic approach, or even they became more efficient at the end of the day because of all the other various components there to support them on setup and turnover and what have you.
It's interesting. Trevor brought up young physicians coming out of residency, and how this is just like this is just the new world that they live in. I'm curious, as an administrator, let's not forget about you. I'm sure now 19, 20 years into your career, things are a lot different than they were 20 years ago, and so there's a lot of adjustment, I'm sure, for you too, with all of this new technology and integrating it and implementing it and putting processes around it. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely fascinating. I think where healthcare has gone, just not 20 years, but I mean, look where we are today. I mean, you have implantable knee implants now that are considered smart devices that send information to the cloud and allow your care team and your physician to track your gait, to look at weight distribution on the implant. I mean, it's amazing the speed of light of in regards to technology and its improvements. For me, it's always trying to determine the roadmap for implementation to ensure that it's one thing to go buy something and put in your facility and expect just people to come and use it. It just doesn't work that way. It's really just the coordinating of pieces and all the various players and resources and variables and understanding that and putting together like a puzzle to create this beautiful picture. And I think that's what we've done here relative to robotics. So it's just not, it takes so much more than me. I mean, I am such a small cog in this operation, in that getting these very highly intelligent people together to map this out. I think that in itself is fun and exciting, but if you're not taking the time to do your foundational setup correctly, you're not going to have a successful program at the end of the day. Sure, you're going to do some cases. You're going to have doctors come in. How long those physicians stay with you, I don't know, because if you're not being able to support them in a highly efficient manner, and you're not reinvesting back into your people to set them up for success, it's not a recipe for success by any means.
Well, so I got a question, right? Because this comes, patient choice is involved in some of this, right? And there's a push and a pull, right? There can be the push by the facility, the push by the patient, but if there's no pull from the physician, it's a no-go, right? You got to have all three of those kind of rolling in the same direction. How much have you seen patients influence surgeons at your facility and in your market adopt this technology and really embrace it?
Yeah, I think the big driver around patient engagement related to the technologies that are coming forth is much more from the marketing side. When patients are coming saying, "Hey, I want that robotic knee," or "Hey, my friend had a bariatric procedure done, and they had it on the robot, and they bounced back so quickly, and everything's going great. I'd love to learn more about that." I think that's where the patient comes into the office, whether it be the physician or calling the hospital. "Hey, do you guys have the robot, or can you tell me more about that?" And we're seeing more and more of that today than I think we've ever seen. In that the educated consumer, right, that they understand what's out there, high level, they understand what's out there, and how those technologies benefit them as the patient, from their time in the OR to post surgical care and recovery. So I think patients are seeking out physicians that they know for sure are utilizing that technology, or heard through the grapevine they're utilizing the technology, because I think the patient better understands what it means for them relative to a recovery and turnaround standpoint.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting observation, right? All the direct to consumer marketing that's going on from these companies, in addition to the traditional efforts that are made by physicians, has just forced some of these things to explode. And really, it's, I think, Trevor, in your situation, curious if you think has that forced you to think further ahead and act more quickly when it comes to, hey, it's time for the third robot, it's time for the fourth robot, it's time for the fifth robot? Like, is that a much greater factor, the consumerism of healthcare?
I think the consumer of healthcare at the end of the day drives a lot of things, but you have to make sure what you're doing at all times is best for the consumer, right? You have to ensure that, and on top of that, that you're set up to support whatever technology or service line you're trying to implement, and that there's a need in the community for it. Now, when we're talking about, hey, how do you determine when it's time for another addition to your fleet of robots or expansion to a new service line? For us on the robotics side, when we decided to upgrade our technology, we heard quite a bit that, hey, when you start to hit 100, I think it was 80 to 100 cases per quarter per robot, you need to start thinking about adding on another robot to your fleet. I think our numbers have I don't want to say disprove that by any means, but have shown that if you have a highly efficient program, you can do quite a bit of volume on a robot. I mean, again, last year, we even have the third robot all year. We got the third robot in April or May of 2021, and we ended up doing over 1,200 cases. So again, I think it's facility based. It's not an approach that, because I did it here, it's the same gauge that another facility should use when they need a robot. But I think when you have a highly efficient model, you're able to eke more out of that robot before you're having to go stroke a check for another one.
That's interesting, right? Because we see facilities here in DFW that have gone and acquired their fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth robot, and they're really not that busy. Like, they're from the outside looking in, the economics don't make sense. And you just shined a light on the whole idea of the intraoperative, not just intraoperative efficiency, but what goes on when the patient's not on the table, and how can we make sure that cases continue to go and we create time for utilization.
The robotic approach doesn't necessarily mean less people or less hands in the operating room, right?
Correct. In the case of the Da Vinci Xi, we have an RN circulator. You still have a scrub tech. You still have your physician. You still have anesthesia. In our case, we have a first assist as well, right? So the first assist is there to assist that surgeon during the case and then after the case. But it's utilizing those various resources, those individuals appropriately, to ensure that you have streamlined processes to create an environment of efficiency, so that you're able to turn the room quickly, get the next patient prepared in the room, boom, start the next case, and you just do that over and over and over. So that's how we're able to do over 1,200 cases on, say, again, 2.5 robots in 2021. But yeah, it's not necessarily a reduction in the number of people. The people are still there. They still have roles and responsibilities. It's just infusing a technology that really has benefit to the patient and to the physician.
Now you might have some sort of non-medical personnel there that is representing the actual robot itself at times. Is that true or no?
Yes, that's correct. So through Intuitive, there are site reps, and so they'll be on site if there's any troubleshooting issues, if the physician has questions. But yes, to support the technology and ensure that it's running smoothly and efficiently.
So, Trevor, are there any specialties here where engaging in robotics doesn't make sense in terms of abdominal surgery, or is it really a benefit across the board if it's a good fit for the physician?
Yeah, I think it's ever changing, it's ever expanding. I mean, think about where we are today with bariatric surgery. I mean, over 80% of my cases last year were done robotically. And to me, that's an indicator of where physicians are going relative to robotic technology. They're better understanding how it can benefit them and their patient and their approach to surgery, and eventually, obviously, be impactful on outcomes and quality. I mean, as of today, when we're talking about the XI, I mean, you have gyn-onc, urology, GYN, colorectal, general surgery, foregut stuff, bariatrics. I mean, I feel like the technology is very much a catch-all. It has the ability, even cardiothoracic to a certain extent. It has the ability to support multiple specialties. And so I don't know where that runway ends. I think that technology is going to continue to expand at a rapid rate. I'm always asking Intuitive when the next robot's coming out, so I can hopefully have first dibs of the newer technology. But obviously, they're unwilling to divulge that information. But I look at what they're doing. I look at other companies. I see how they themselves are trying to come out with similar robotic platforms. So when you talk about, hey, is there a specialty this isn't meant for? I mean, I sit there and say, look where we are with orthopedics and spine. I mean, there's robots for them now. I mean, it's pretty incredible stuff. So I don't see this aspect of the industry slowing down anytime soon. I see it expanding beyond what any of us could have ever imagined.
Interesting. As this continues to grow, what about the surgeons, and I call them the old school surgeons, who are still reluctant after many years of having this technology available to them? What about the surgeons who are still reluctant to go in this direction? Are we going to come upon a time where facilities are going to not actively recruit those physicians, not necessarily turn them away, but not show, and I hate to say not show them any love, but is there a point in time where the clinical evidence is so overwhelming that a physician's just not given preference or given time if they're not adopting some of this new technology?
I can speak from my standpoint. We always look for a high quality surgeon, right? A physician, someone who their bedside care is exceptional, their communication, of course, their quality, their outcomes, regardless of the technology they utilize. So here locally, I don't see us alienating anyone based off of their relative to their preference of utilizing technology or not utilizing the technology. But what I do see happening is probably more of the teaching institutions putting forth this technology early on exposure, right, for residents and then of course in the fellowships. And I see that maybe being more impactful in regards to what happens within the facilities themselves moving forward, and that more of those coming out of residency and fellowship will be saying, wait, hey, so I trained here and we utilize predominantly the XI or whatever technology may be. Do you have that here? And I think that will more likely be the factor that dictates whether facilities have the technology or not when it comes to the physician recruitment standpoint, relative to what that physician recruit feels like they need to have at their fingertips to be successful in treating their patients at that particular facility in that particular community. So I see that kind of being more of the way things will end up going. I mean, we've certainly seen that in the orthopedic space relative to whether it be Zimmer's Rosa, the Smith & Nephew Corey, the Stryker Mako. I can tell you when I'm talking to physician recruits in the orthopedic space, especially those who are doing total joints, more times than not, I get asked, what type of technologies do you have available here relative to total joint replacement?
That's interesting.
So
Right.
I see that being more driven by those coming out of training now and moving forward.
Do you think surgeons lose some of their edge by relying so heavily on some of this technology?
The question becomes, when the technology fails, are they able to continue on and perform the surgery absent of the technology? Can they do it just as well? I think that becomes the question. I don't know if it necessarily hinders them. I think that's going to be a person by person question. But is it something that's interesting to bat around? Certainly,
But I mean,
because technology does fail at times, right?
Yeah.
So what do you do?
I mean, from my perspective, you could apply this to anything. I mean, you could say the same thing about airline pilots. I mean, nowadays they, outside of their checklist before they fly an airplane, it basically flies itself. It takes off and lands itself. So what happens when they're at 35,000 feet and the technology fails? Are they ready for that? So I mean, and you got on a list of all industries. That's just what we're facing, right? I mean, technology is at warp speed. So, and it's not going away. So it's you either have to adapt or die, right?
I mean, technology is wonderful, but
Until it isn't.
Until it isn't.
Well, final thoughts, Trevor. We spent the better part of about 45 minutes chatting here. It's gone pretty quick. Where does it go from here? And as an administrator, where's your head at over the next 5 years as you look to continue to grow and develop new business and expand the reach of Baylor Frisco?
Yeah, it's 5 years sounds like a really long ways off. It's not by any means. What's interesting is DFW. The last time I heard, I think they were north of 145 robots in the market.
Holy cow!
A lot. And so if you use that as an indicator as to where healthcare is going, to where technology is going relative to hospitals and the ability to provide care, surgical care to patients, I see that number expanding. Where is the ceiling? I don't know. But what I do know is that with a growing community, whether that be Frisco or the outskirts DFW period, as more people come into this marketplace, there's going to be a continued need for that technology. There's going to be a demand from the physician perspective to have access to that technology. So I think the number of robots are going to continue to increase within the DFW marketplace. Every market's different, so I don't want to say that's a nationwide practice, but it is something that we're seeing here. But I think at the end of the day, it's to the benefit of both the patient and the surgeon. But robotics, period, technology. I mentioned this earlier, the orthopedic space with their robots, the spine space now with their navigation, robotic technology. And of course, you have what we're talking about today on the Da Vinci, on the XI platforms, and the technology and what it offers to the various group of specialties is remarkable. And so, in my personal opinion, we're going to continue to see a trend towards more of this robotic assisted surgery relative to, again, the spectra of surgical services.
Awesome. Well, as we wrap up here, Trevor, how do patients find your facility? What's your website?
Sure.
Just Google us.
Yeah, Baylor Frisco. You type in BaylorFrisco.com. We're located here in Frisco, Texas, off of Warren and Legacy. Again, first hospital in Frisco, so I'm sure you could ask anyone and they'll be able to point it out.
Yeah.
If you're familiar with the Dallas Cowboys World Headquarters, we're just across the street and down a little bit, so you can't miss us. Well, I guess you could miss us. When I came to interview here, I thought this place was actually a hotel. It's what it looks like from the outside, and so I drove by a couple of times thinking my GPS was misleading me, but couldn't find out it was actually the hospital. It's a beautiful facility. It does look like a hotel from the outside as well as the inside. So those interested, if they're looking to have surgery or need recommendations for surgeons, they always can call the hospital, and we can provide a list of surgeons and specialties.
Well, and I give your cafeteria food is top notch. It's become one of my favorite
tell you
spots,
what,
actually.
When you have the community coming in and eating it like a restaurant, it's pretty good.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh,
It's
my
a hidden
goodness.
secret. Hospital food used to be the worst.
Mhm.
Like you just avoided it like the plague. I gotta tell you, they got something special going on at Baylor Frisco.
Really? What do you guys got? Some
Their
sort
daily
of a,
lunch, their daily
famous
lunch
chef?
special. I mean, they had shrimp scampi a couple
Yeah,
weeks ago. I mean,
the
it's
it's pretty incredible. We do have an executive chef here who does an absolutely amazing job. But the Frisco 15 is true. When you first come here, you will put it on, and it's hard to shed. So it's if you haven't had the opportunity to experience the cafeteria, I would highly recommend it. It's unbelievable. It really is.
well, world-class facility for many reasons, right, Trevor?
It's a pretty remarkable place. Yeah.
Keep up the good work, Trevor. Great to
Yeah.
meet you.
Yeah, so thankful for carving out a little bit of time for us today. And if anybody on this episode or in our audience wants to be able to talk to Trevor, heads up, send us a message. We can always make that professional connection. Trevor's been great to work with, and man, we really look forward to continuing to help you grow your program and watching the success story continue. It's pretty remarkable, and you're on a fast track to stardom, that's for sure.
Well, I appreciate the support, and again, back to my comment, I'm a small cog in the wheel. It's my team, frontline staff. I mean, they're the ones that make all this happen. So all the kudos should be going to them.
Well, good stuff. Well, that's it for this week of the Cutting Edge Podcast. Tune in a couple more weeks. We have a pre-Memorial Day episode focusing on Carry the Load. As a charitable organization they are really doing special things. So
Phenomenal. Yeah.
look forward to that episode. Trevor, we'll see you soon, parts.
I appreciate it. Thank
All right,
you.
guys,
Trevor,
have a
thanks.
good day.